Hi friends! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren. You may also call me Lo, and today I'm bringing you the 20 questions book tag. I don't know who originally created this tag. I've watched like 20 plus of these videos trying to figure out who originally created this tag, and I still have no idea. I don't think we know who created it, which is very sad. So if you know who created this tag, please leave their channel name in a comment down below, and I will be sure to add a link to their channel in the description. I was tagged by my friend Cushy, and I will leave a link to her channel down below. Please go check her out. Please subscribe to her channel. I love her content, and you will not regret it. This tag is, unsurprisingly, 20 bookish questions, and that's a lot more questions than I've ever answered in a video, so without further ado, I'm going to get on into it. The first question is, how many books is too many books in a series? This is a really good question. I think my answer is probably 4. For me, a duology is super doable. I love duologies because it's 2 books and you're done. That's not a huge commitment. Trilogies, again, I don't think they're a huge commitment. 3 books, that's totally doable for me. Once we get into 4 or more books, that's when I feel like I've made a very large commitment to a series. And that's when I start to hesitate to pick books up in a series or to start series, because that's just such a big commitment. I never want to be in the middle of more than 1, maybe 2, 4 or more book series. I will read them. I'm not saying I won't read 4+ book series, but it's definitely the beginning of where I start to hesitate and be intimidated. Question number 2 is, how do you feel about cliffhangers? How do I feel about cliffhangers? I don't mind a cliffhanger. I don't mind the idea of a cliffhanger, and I think that cliffhangers often make me want to pick up the next book, which is totally the purpose of them. But there are a couple of scenarios in which a cliffhanger can be really upsetting. The first for me is that sometimes I will read a book and it's the beginning of a series and I go through the whole book and I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to continue this, like, just not really feeling it. And then I get to the cliffhanger and I'm like, okay, now I have to read the next book. Thanks a lot. That's the purpose of a cliffhanger. But that, I don't know, I feel like it makes me read books that I probably wouldn't pick up and probably won't enjoy. So that I don't like about cliffhangers. And I'm not a person who is gonna get upset that there's a cliffhanger and then I have to wait like a year or whatever to read the next book if it's not come out yet. Mostly because I'm not like a sequential series reader. I never like binge series. I always read a couple books in between books in a series. So by the time I pick up the next book, I've already forgotten the cliffhanger, and the cliffhanger's never enough to make me immediately pick up the next book. I thought there was another scenario in which cliffhangers were really upsetting, but I think that's it. So do I like them? Sometimes. Question number 3 is hardbacks or paperbacks? I think I prefer a paperback. I think that they like sit in your hands better and they're a little bit easier to read. Sometimes hardbacks can be so stiff and just hard to carry around with you and like just less easy to work with. But I don't mind reading a hardcover. I think the reading experience though is better with a paperback. Next question is, what is your favorite book? Which is a horrible question. I read a lot of books. I read so many books that I don't have a favorite book. I have a lot of favorite books, and asking this question in general for all the books I've ever read is impossible. It's impossible for me to answer that. But I will give you a few of my favorite books from this year. This is not an all-inclusive list of my favorite books from the year. That will come at the end of the year. But a couple that I've given 5 stars to and I think are absolutely amazing are first, Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukafka. This book was phenomenal. I listened to it on audiobook and it was a really easy 5-star for me. I think a lot of people are picking this up now, which is great. Highly recommend it if you haven't yet. It's wonderful. It's heavy, but it's wonderful. Another is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. I have been shoving this down everyone's throat all year. I read this in March as an ARC and it blew me away. It was so much better than I ever could have imagined. This book is so underhyped. I have heard hardly anyone talk about it, so I'm plugging it. Please read it. It's so, 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 so good. Everyone in my life who reads has received this book from me over the course of this year at some point. And another one is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I love Brandon Sanderson. I have never given a Brandon Sanderson book less than 5 stars. This was no exception. This was so, so good. I was a little bit iffy on whether I wanted to try his YA, and it was so good. No regrets. Definitely pick this one up. Please. The next question, unsurprisingly, is least favorite book. Similar situation. I can't tell you what my number one least favorite book is in life. And I can't even really tell you what my number one least favorite book was this year, but some that I did not enjoy were Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead. This was so disappointing. I gave it 2 stars. No. Another one was I Love You But I've Chosen Darkness by Claire Vaye Watkins. I just read this. I haven't talked about it in a wrap-up yet, but I did not like it. I do not recommend it. And another one where if you've been watching my videos, you probably already know about this one, but I read an arc for Stay Awake by Megan Golden, and that book was not good. I gave it 2 stars. Do not recommend. So those are 3 that I didn't like, but there are more that I didn't like. Question number 6 is love triangles, yes or no? I went through a period of time where I thought I hated love triangles. I had read a couple of YA books that had love triangles, and I just found them to be like distracting and pointless. But I recently have read a couple of books with love triangles that I thought were really good. One of them that comes to mind immediately is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Lynn Tan. This book was so good. I gave it 4 stars, and it definitely had a love triangle sort of at its center. I thought it was really well done. I just thought it was great. So this was a good love triangle. And I also recently finished Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And Book Lovers also has kind of a love triangle in it. It's not at the focal point of the story. It's kind of a side plot almost. And I thought that one was well done too. I really enjoyed that book. That was a 4.5 star read. I'll talk about it more in my wrap up, but I found some good ones. And honestly, I went through my Goodreads books that I've read this year, and I haven't read any books with bad love triangles, or with, I think that those are the only 2 books I've read with love triangles. So this year the love triangles have done it for me, but in the past they've been kind of iffy. Question number 7 is, what is the most recent book you just couldn't finish? And this one, I don't really have a real answer for. I'm really, really, really bad at DNFing books. I will trudge through a book that I don't like just to get to the end of it and say that I've read it, which isn't a great thing, a fatal flaw, if you will. But I do start books and I don't finish them in one specific circumstance, which is when I read an audiobook. I will pick up an audiobook through my library and I'll I'll listen to the first 1 or 2 chapters of it to make sure that it's a book that I want to listen to. Some books just don't work for me on audio. I can't really explain why. Sometimes it's the narrator, sometimes it's just like the complexity of the story. And the most recent one that I read a couple of chapters of and then decided I wasn't going to listen to, I was going to read physically instead, was Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book I actually recently purchased and plan to read very, very soon. My best friend from high school reads quite a bit, and we decided to buddy read that book, so I will be reading that book physically. So it's not a real DNF, it's more of a soft DNF, extremely soft in this case, because I'll have read it very, very soon probably. But yeah, that's like the one circumstance that I really do DNF books. And even then, if you've only read a chapter or two, is it a real DNF? I don't know. Often those are books that I end up picking up physically later on. So do with that what you will. Question number 8 is, what is a book that you're currently reading? Right now I'm in the middle of 2 books, one physical, one audio. The physical book is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. As you can see, I'm a little bit over halfway through it. I'm really, really enjoying this. I think it's going to be like 4+ stars, and I think that my audiobook that I'm currently reading is also going to be 4+ stars, and that is Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. Question number 9 is, what is the last book you recommended to someone? So, same friend that I talked about a couple of questions ago, who I'm reading Clara and the Sun with, I recently bought her a birthday present, and that birthday present was Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. Like I said, everyone in my life who reads has received this book this year. It's just what's happening. It's underhyped. People need to read it. People need to read it. So I bought her this. So she had told me that she read Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee and really loved it. And that is amazing. I gave that 5 stars. Also this year. And I ended up telling her about Black Cake because Black Cake is also a multi-generational story with kind of some similar aspects to Pachinko. Something that I really enjoyed about Pachinko and something that she really enjoyed about Pachinko is that it taught us both about the history of Korea and the history of Japan and kind of the parts of history there that we as Americans haven't learned in school, and that was interesting to both of us. And this also has some interesting history about the Caribbean and about other parts of the world. So yeah, this is really good. Has some similarities to Pachinko, which is why I think that she'll really like it, but I'm not gonna lie, I've definitely shoved this down people's throats who have not read similar books and have not loved similar books. I just think this is so good. The next question is kind of interesting. It's, what is the oldest book you've read? So for this one, I went into my Goodreads, and my Goodreads I started in 2018. Obviously I read books prior to 2018, but I have no like real record of those books. So the oldest book that I have recorded on Goodreads and have read for pleasure is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This book came out in... let's check. This book came out in 1938, and I read it in 2019 and I gave it 3 stars. And that is the oldest book that's recorded in my Goodreads, and I think it's safe to say that's the oldest book I've ever read for pleasure. Question number 11 is, what is the newest book you've read? That one's pretty easy. I've already mentioned this book in this video, but the newest book I've read is Stay Awake by Megan Golden. I read this as an ARC, so obviously I read it very early on, pre-publication. It was published this month in August, so you can pick it up if you want to, but I don't recommend it. Yeah, I've read quite a few 2022 releases, but that's definitely the newest. Question number 12 is, what is your favorite author? I have a lot. Obviously, there are a lot of books that I've really loved, but I kind of don't consider an author to be a favorite author unless I've read multiple of their books and have given multiple of their books 5 stars. So that kind of whittles it down to 2. I'm very stingy with my 5 stars, as you probably know. So the 2 authors that I would say are my favorites are Brandon Sanderson. I've given every book of his that I've ever read 5 stars. I hope that streak lasts, but I think so far I've read 3 books and they're all 5 stars. So definitely a favorite author. And then I've also given 2 5 stars to N.K. Jemisin. I read the Broken Earth trilogy and I gave the first book and the 3rd book 5 stars. So favorite author there as well. Question number 13 is, buying books or borrowing books? I feel like for a lot of these questions I can't answer them straight. This is no exception. About half of my reading is physical books and half of my reading is audiobooks. I usually have one of each going at any given time, as you saw with the books that I'm currently reading. All of my audiobooks are books from the library. Usually I don't own them, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, all those books are library books that I don't own physically. And then the other half of my reading is books that I bought that I am reading physically. So my reading's very split between buying books and borrowing books, and so both. Question number 14 is a book you hate that everyone else seems to love. This is an easy answer for me. A couple of years ago, maybe last year, I read Bunny by Mona Awad, and I listened to it, which I think was a mistake, but I listened to it, I absolutely hated it. I thought it was so pointless and just a waste of time. I gave it 1 star. I hated it that much. When I read that book, I was trying to read Goodreads Choice Awards nominees. This was prior to BookTube. I was just trying to like find new books, new authors, and I thought that that was a good way to kind of read some good books. I later found out that the Goodreads Choice Awards is like a really weird system. I can make a video about that, but there are several floating around BookTube. Let me know if you want to see that from me. But it's a really weird system. I don't know how the books are chosen. And at the time that I read it, I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard anyone talk about it. I just went for it. And it was not, it was not good. And I want to say like 6 months to a year, maybe to multiple years after that, people started picking up this book and loving it. And it became like this big thing that everyone was reading. And at that point I was like, I already read this book and it's not good. So I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know if it's the audiobook format. I've definitely thought about picking this book up physically and seeing if I like it more that way, but it's so hard to return to a book that I hated so viscerally. People are gonna like unsubscribe, but there you have it. Next is question 15, and that is bookmarks or dog ears. Another question that I can't answer straight. So I guess I'll start with, when I own a book and I know I'm going to keep that book, I have no problem destroying that book. And I don't mean destroying like I'm gonna burn it or something, but I like the feel and the look of a well-worn book, especially if it's a book that I love and I'm going to keep. No problem with my books not looking pristine. So if I know that I'm going to keep a book, I will dog ear, I will break the spine. I don't care. As long as the book is like in one piece, I'm happy. However, I have this kind of system where I buy books, and if I read them and they're not 4.5 or 5-star reads, I will try to sell them to my used bookstore in order to get store credit to get more books, and that is a cycle that I go through constantly. And I want to make sure that the books that I read and try to sell are in as good of shape as they possibly can be, because you don't want to try to sell like a totally tattered book, right? So when I'm reading a book for the first time and I don't know if I'm going to love it or not, I tend to be very careful. I'll use a bookmark and I'll keep the dust jacket, away from the book as I'm reading it to try to keep it in really good shape so that if I do end up not absolutely loving it, I can sell it to my used bookstore. That is a long way of saying both. Both. I will say that for a while I would always dog ear my books, and I found that if you kind of like flatten out, this is like some used bookstore owner is gonna comment, but I found that if you like flatten the book page after dog earing it, you can't really tell. People are gonna be like, yeah, you can, but I don't think you can really tell. So I used to do that and sell them anyway, but at some point I kind of switched to using a bookmark, and now I'm kind of dependent on bookmarks, but I don't mind dog ears. Question number 16 is, what is a book that you can always reread? I'm not a big rereader, but I like to keep books that I think I could want to reread in the future. And the two books that I can think of that are like really comfort reads, I haven't reread either of them. I need to preface this by saying that, but I think about rereading them and I can imagine myself in a situation where I'd want to reread them. And those two books are The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I read this so long ago, but if like 4 to 5 to 6 years ago you had asked me what my favorite book of all time was, it was this. And this book just elicits like such a comforting kind of feeling in me that I really think I will return to this at some point. And similarly, Empress of Salt and Fortune by Niveau, the coziest read that I can think of. If you haven't read this, what are you doing? It's so short. What are you doing? At some point, I'd love to have enough of these like super comfy, cozy books that I can make a video about them, but for now, I only have a few. So I'll read more. We'll come back to that. Question number 17 is, can you read while listening to music? Absolutely not. The answer is absolutely not. I don't like music. I find it very distracting. And I also don't like specific kinds of ambient noise. So I can't read with the TV on for the most part. I can read with sports on because I can drown out sports so easily. I don't know if this is relatable to anyone, but I didn't grow up around sports, and watching sports, like, there's nothing more dry and boring in the world. So sports are something I can definitely read during, but like TV shows I find distracting. And not that I would like try to watch a TV show while reading, but sometimes, you know, I live with another human, so sometimes that's kind of the situation. Sports are an exception, and music, definitely not. I find music really, really distracting, so no. An exception to that, though, is I can read in like a coffee shop or a bookstore or anywhere that has music playing, like ambient music in a coffee shop or something doesn't bother me. Can't explain that. But like if I'm in my house and there's music playing, not gonna happen. Question number 18 is one POV or multiple. And this one, Cushy, who tagged me in this video, was like very adamant that multiple POVs is better. I don't really care. Like, I don't think that I have a preference between multiple or single. The thing I will say is that I think multiple can be too much. The series that comes to mind is A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, otherwise known as like the Game of Thrones series. Those books have like 750 POVs, and I had to keep notes. I had to keep like pages of notes about characters to keep that book straight, and that was too much. Didn't like that. So single POV doesn't bother me, multiple POV doesn't bother me, but probably like 5, I'd say, for multiple is my limit. Once it gets more than that, like sometimes it's okay, but sometimes it's like, how am I supposed to keep this all in my brain? How? So that's my answer for that question. Question number 19 is, do you read books in one sitting or over multiple days? Over multiple days by and large, but there have been a few books that I've read in one sitting over audiobook. So sometimes when I get into a mood or a situation where I'm like, I'm gonna clean my entire house, I will put on a short audiobook, one that's like 4 hours or less. And I listen to my audiobooks on 1.1 speed. I'm not like a speed audiobook reader. I really need to be able to listen to everything. So 1.1, 1.15 sometimes is kind of my limit. So I do read a little bit faster than the like estimated time. Sometimes I will read a book in one sitting as I'm cleaning my house over multiple hours. The one that I can think of that I did that with this year was Punching the Air by E.B. Zaboy and Yusuf Salaam. That was a great book. Highly recommend. I think I gave it 4, 4.5. something like that. I think there are a couple more that I've done that with this year, but I can't think of them. Finally, question number 20 is, who do you tag? So I'm tagging Kirsten at Kirsten's Corner, Adriana at Carbon Bonded Books, Ingrid at Ingrid Inspired, Michelle at Michelle's Library, Darian at Darian Reads, Nina at Books with Neen, and Bex at Bex Books. I hope you all enjoy doing this tag. I thought it was fun. I hope you thought it was fun. If you're new to my channel, please consider liking this video and subscribing. And if you're still here, thank you so much for being here. I always really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.